Greetings, fellow changelings. I heads up. If I sound more chipper than usual, it's because this change is coming at you in the morning. I'm recording at 9 a.m. and I'm realizing that all of the other editions of this have been midday joints. And not to say I've been sleepy, but you might find that I have a little bit more pep in my figurative step as we chat today about this version's breaking change, which is about learning to code and whether that's still a good idea. But first, let's kick things off by reminding you that the title of this running series, this program, is Breaking Change. I am your host, Justin Searles, and exciting news over the recording studio. To reduce the amount of mouth clicks and swallow sounds, I have inverted my microphone. So if it sounds like I'm speaking in an Australian accent, that's because I'm upside down right now, relative to where you usually hear me. Let's start with a quick life update. It's been a bit over a week, I'd say, here since version 8. I think I reported that our bathroom remodel was just about done, just a couple finishing touches to go. Those finishing touches have been touched. And so we've got this beautiful bathroom now, and it's exactly how we wanted it, and we still haven't really used it. Yet to take a shower, yet to take a bath, yet to wash my hands in the sink. And the reason for that is that we so thoroughly moved out of the bathroom, which was most of a day exercise of emptying out every single cabinet, every single drawer, and so forth, into 2 separate guest bathrooms upstairs. And then a month elapsed. And now and not just because our closet it's 1 layer deeper into the ensuite from the bathroom, and we knew the bathroom would be off limits. We also basically took a subset of each of our clothes, and Becky put hers in the guest room closet, and I put mine in a linen closet because I don't have a lot of clothes. Just a couple little rows of, rolled up t-shirts and socks. So all of our clothes are also, living the nomad life. And just the ordeal of moving it all back into where it should properly be means that our bathroom has been legit 100% done and paid for a week, and we still haven't used it. And I would like to move back in, but then, as soon as we start talking about it, I was like, this would be a great opportunity to kind of get rid of some half-empty bottles of toiletries, go through our laundry and our clothing, wardrobes, and before we go and pack that closet to the gills again, maybe rethink a few things. And so now we're actually in a state of our clothes being kind of laid out even more so all over the place upstairs, everywhere except for the closet. But sometimes, when you want to tidy up or when you want to organize, you gotta, and this is actually something that I can really relate to with programming computers, is when you want to refactor something, very often the problem is it's knotted up and it's densely packed and coiled. You have to unwind it, which means you have to expand it, which means you have to let it breathe. And so you might end up with little bits of code in a whole bunch of different places. Just like you'd have piles of clothes laid out in front of you. And you've got to organize all of those into maybe, however you're going to do it, whether types of clothes or the purpose of those clothes. I can really relate to that exercise because I feel, and you might be able to spreadsheet for the same purpose. Whenever I've had to undergo a really complicated refactoring in a system, it's almost always gone the same way. It's like, well, here's this one file that is thousands of lines long that does 500 different unrelated things. And we need to change a handful of those things, and we need to do it in a way where we leave this better than we found it. And to unwind one thing, it's like you're pulling on a thread in a big ball of yarn, and you realize, well, in order to get this thread out, I've got to go and, It's like a Rubik's Cube, but even less fun. So anyway, not moved into the bathroom yet. As soon as I take a shower in the new shower, I can't wait to be back on the program to complain about the water pressure. As I helplessly realize there's nothing to be done because that tile is not coming out. All right. So that's the bathroom update. Four versions of this podcast of me updating you on my bathroom remodel. I can't wait to be done with that. And by done, I mean fully moved back in. And, at this rate, I just hope we stay in this house for a while. I think that's probably how everyone feels when they get a serious renovation done in their home, is you never make that full amount of money back when you resell your home, because people are just counting bedrooms and bathrooms typically. And unless you're in a super duper inventory constrained market where it's really a seller's market, there's no one who's going to come and be like, yes, well, the way that they have designed this one, kitchen sink, that's worth me throwing a couple extra $1,000 on top. So, and it's not like, unless you're pulling permits and doing a major expansion or something, it's not like it's going to show up in the Zillow listing. And so bathroom remodels are for the owner, like the current resident occupant of the home, just renovations generally. And so it makes you, after forking over all that money, knowing that it's you spending for your own purpose. Well, now I've got it's maybe a kissing cousin of sunk cost fallacy. It's like, well, I paid for all this, I should go and enjoy it now. So now, even if I wanted to move, I wouldn't want to move because I've got, several years of bathrooming to do before I'm going to feel like I got my bathroom's worth. So yeah, it's an investment in that sense, like as an investment as in you're stuck with it, not investment as in it'll make money. Other news, I recovered, I restored, I pulled out the old paleontologist kit with my little brush and my little pick, and I restored to full splendor my website legitimate.us for my shell corporation, which is named Legitimate LLC. It's currently not very active. It was used to hold a couple investments a while ago, and we unwound those investments. So now it's mostly just a joke site. But it stopped working for a while, and it never supported SSL and all that. So I made it work again, and I put it up on Heroku. And so now if you go to legitimate.us, or if you email me at please@legitimateus, I'll get the email. And the website, it's a funny way. I went to one of those websites, and this was 6-7 years ago. I went to a website where you downloaded zip files of pre-made websites, and they were all static assets. I don't know why. Like, I guess they probably still exist. I don't know what their business model is. But yeah, you just really crappy websites. I wanted to go I want the crappiest stock photoiest, just garbage. If there's not frames and frame sets and table HTML tags in there, I don't want it. And so I got just this really cheesy site, and I was bummed when it stopped working. And so I made it work again. And so I pleased to enjoy going to legitimate.us if you want to check it out. There's some what I think is some legitimately funny copy in there. Yesterday, we're recording this on April 2nd. That's April 2nd should have a name that plays off of April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day, yesterday, April 1st, I just, sometimes I'll pick up, I've got a list. So whenever I'm blocked on the project that I'm working on, I will look at my to-do list I've got like I've got a list of sort of just like little app ideas, little projects, little experiments, little jokey things. And I'll pick one of those off. And so my hour-long joke project yesterday, not realizing it was April Fool's Day just because I always wanted to do it, was I if you go to justin.searles.co, you'll see a lot of tweet-like posts, because those are my like little like fire and forget thoughts that I might have throughout the day. And usually they're a link to something else, or they're just a little shower thought. But, you know, it's a totally static site. It's just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There's no backend. There's no servers. There's no database, which means when you click bookmark on the bookmark icon underneath one of those takes, I call them takes as opposed to tweets, it stores in local storage. It stores it in your browser, so it'll remember that you clicked the bookmark. And in fact, if you go to /bookmarks, it'll render a list of all the takes you've bookmarked on that browser, which I think is kind of funny. Well, I used that same system to add another button, which is a heart icon. And the heart icon works the same way, where you click heart on a take and it will heart it. You'll see the heart, and when you refresh the page, the heart will stay there because it's in the browser's local storage. But additionally, it shows a randomly generated number between like 1 and 4,000, including the, like, if it's over 1,000, it does like the 1.1K, 1.2K rounding. And I wanted to make it feel like when you clicked a heart that you were doing something. So, because like if you just click the heart and it still said 784 likes, that would not be satisfying. People would be like, oh, well, that's dumb, it's broken. So I was like, well, now I gotta write just enough JavaScript to increment this. So I made it so I click it, and now it goes from like 1.2 to 1.3K when you click it. And then of course, when you click it again, that is to unheart it. It goes back down from 1.3 to 1.2K. But of course, then, when you refresh the page, you got to take that random number. The random number is assigned at build time. So every time I build the site, all the numbers are going to change because none of this matters. So you'll refresh the page, it'll still say 1.3 if you'd hearted it. But that means then that I got to go through, like in the JavaScript, like when the page first loads, I got to decorate all those like images, and then I got to go and increment all of the affected like counts. And so it was actually like, it was a fun little tidy hour-long joke project, and I posted it up because now anyone who like looks at the thing will be like, oh wow, that has like 3.8K likes. And of course the likes don't matter because they're all made up and nothing matters, which is very similar to Elon's website x.com where it'll just show you millions of views, and there's absolutely no way to be sure that that number is at all anchored in reality. So yeah, it's made up. Aaron has my good friend Aaron Patterson has said many times that when he sees the likes on my website, he feels weird that he can't click on it's like he needs a fidget spinner. He needs to be able to hit the heart, even though he knows that it wouldn't do anything. So that goes out for Aaron. I only realized after the fact that it was an accidental April Fool's joke. But nope, that's actually what I do now on normal days. If I'd been shooting for an April Fool's joke, I would have done something more ridiculous, like something serious. Yeah, I'm actually kind of bummed that that's the day that it came out on. But I played myself. Let's see, other stuff in life. Biggest development faux pas, biggest development fuck up for me, software-wise, building Becky's app. She's got this admin interface. I'm basically building like a poor man's active admin or Rails admin or administrate. If you've ever used Rails and you've needed an admin interface that just needs to do basic CRUD operations for a lot of tables, you've probably seen these tools that purport to like, oh, just slap it on, then configure the tables, and then it's like bingo bango, you've got a whole interface now for your admins to create new records and edit them and delete them and update them. And those are all well and good on day one. But then they are very not okay on day 100, because when you go to update your gems, you realize, oh shit, like active admin doesn't work with the latest version of Rails, for example, or it's got all these other dependencies because basically it's a full blown app. And one of those dependencies doesn't work with the latest version of this other thing that I'm trying to update. And so they are a very fraught dependency to carry around. Test Double, I know, has had a lot of projects where teams were either hobbled by active admin or Rails admin or administrate, or they were being tasked with upgrading, like a Rails upgrade, and that was the main blocker. That was the thing making it really difficult. So I didn't want to use one of those, but Becky has a ton of admin pages because she is building out all these exercise programs, which require you to have workouts, and the workouts are made up of a whole bunch of movements, like lifts and exercises. And those movements require equipment, right? So you can already kind of imagine the sprawl of individual little catalogs and libraries of information to build. And so I'm building my own. And a lot of these things have a name field, like the name of the equipment, the name of the movement, the name of the workout, the name of the program. And there they are in forms. And when you fill out the form in a modern browser like Chrome or Safari, if the label has the word name in it, or if the ID has the word name, even if it's wrapped with underscores, even if it's like just part of the name, if the word name shows up anywhere there, and even if you tell the browser using HTML's attribute autocomplete equals off, because so many websites don't want you auto-completing things like usernames and passwords, modern browsers ignore autocomplete off when one of their heuristics says, oh, this is a name field. I know how to fill names. And so then it'll, every time, no matter what I did, unless I literally just turned off autofill at the browser level, which is, I don't think, quite a solution, the little autofill pop-up I would start typing like barbell, for example, in the equipment. And then when I typed BAR, the Safari autofill would very garishly like list every Barbara that was in my contacts and be like, no, I don't want Barbara here. I want barbell. And I think it's only become more invasive over the years on macOS, where it can really like it screws with focus a lot. Not just like your brain's focus. I mean to say like sometimes I will find that clicks get swallowed, and when you tab over, it'll tab through the contact or whatever's being autofilled instead of to the next form field. Whereas if anything, it's gotten a little bit nicer on mobile, because now that Apple has very consistently applied the autocomplete bar at the top of the virtual keyboard, you can kind of happily ignore a lot of those autocompletes, and you might not even notice them while you're typing. So it's really frustrating on macOS in particular. And the solution, and you can Google this, like every solution, like I asked ChatGPT this, and I asked a couple follow-ups, and then I realized it was getting fed from Stack Overflow. And so I got curious, and you read these Stack Overflow things, and the just bananas workarounds people would solve with like, okay, so after you render the page, change all of the names to some other name that doesn't have the word name in it, or the phrase address in it, or the phrase phone in it, because those will all trigger this, or the word password for people trying to prevent password autocomplete for whatever asinine reason. And then when the person submits, you hook into the JavaScript event for form submission, and then you unchange all of the fucked field names, and then you submit the form. And I was like, that is a solution. But that is probably not a good one, not a real sustainable one, and it's a pretty silly fucking workaround. So instead, I went through my database and I just changed all of these things that were titled name to title. So all these columns that were name are now title, not because the database makes more sense that way, not because the code makes more sense that way, but because I really prefer when for a particular attribute of a particular model, it has the same name all the way up and down the stack, and there's not some translation happening just for the front end. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes, especially once you've launched and you realize you need to change the label for a particular for users to understand what it is, for example, that's fine. But like here I am in pre-launch status. I would rather just bite the bullet now and do a lot of grep and replace. And it was a lot of find and replace throughout the whole code base as I changed all these names to titles. Sure enough, you change them and then it worked fine. And that just sort of frustrates me because I hate whenever bad actors ruin things for everybody. And here in this case, the bad actor isn't that bad. It's just somebody who probably wanted to aggressively turn off autocomplete, and sometimes maybe for good reasons. Like in my case, I wanted autocomplete turned off because the name that you're typing in is not a human name. I will never have a piece of equipment that is named Barbara unless I get like a really cool, like semi-automatic rifle that has a flamethrower attachment. Then I'd name it something dramatic, like I was in, one of those like Platoon or one of those Vietnam movies. But then I don't have the biceps for that. So I haven't gone down that road yet. So yeah, that was my big development, like WTF of this version, software wise. Let's see what else is going on. Another software thing that just kind of annoys me is every time I leave the house, there's a particular shortcut, Siri shortcut I want to run. And it's not every time. So I don't want to automatically kick this shortcut off. Like, for example, whenever I plug in CarPlay, I don't want my home alarm system to turn on because, like, what if Becky's still there? And of course, you could configure the shortcut to say, like, only do it if Becky's not there, right? Because the other people in your home, you can say, first of all, it doesn't work 100% of the time. But like, what if I'm leaving the house and we've got our cleaners there, right? Or I don't know. I just don't want to turn the alarm on for some reason. I want to be able to have a shortcut, like on the home screen in CarPlay. Just like you have these, the 5 apps that work on CarPlay are on the home screen. It'd be really cool if you could add a shortcut. And there's already a thing for the watch in the Shortcuts app. You can just like check a box and say, hey, show this on the watch app. It'd be really nice if you could just show a shortcut on the CarPlay home screen. It doesn't mean there has to be a UI, but it would be really cool to be able to click like ring away and it'll do my monitoring, or like lock up. There's only one right now. There's only one HomeKit shortcut integration at all in CarPlay, and that's if you're in the split view where you can see the map on the left and the player on the right. On the bottom right of that particular screen, which is hard to get to because you have to click home screen 2 times. There is usually if you're near the home, a garage door up, garage door down button. And that way you can open the garage as you're approaching the home. That's fine. But it would be super cool. And an example of like just an incremental improvement to CarPlay that would be quite nice that CarPlay never seems to get. But instead, for all the money that Apple's blown on cars, they canceled their $10 billion car project. They're still trying to make CarPlay Gen 3, Gen 2 like a thing where they, it's going to be in Porsches and Aston Martins. And I'm sure there's a ton of complexity there. Like, I get disappointed when, man, like just these like incremental improvements or these basic bug fixes that would cost, give me just $1 billion, Craig, and I'll fix all kinds of shit in Mac OS and CarPlay and iOS. I get it. It's hard to run a business that way, but man, there's a balance, right? There's always this trade-off of how much do we focus on new development that might capture new revenue or expand the moat around our business or achieve something strategic that is outside the box of what we are currently achieving on one end, and keep the trains that we currently rely on running on the other, right? And almost every company will favor aggressively going after the new stuff, the new money, and will forget that they also have a responsibility of make sure that the trains keep running. And that could mean literally fixing bugs. That could mean literally make sure it keeps working at the very extreme. But also just like making room for incremental improvements that keep you competitive, delight and surprise customers, reinforce their satisfaction with you by doing stuff that's inside the bounds of what they're already familiar with, rather than, at some point, Apple just started fanning out all of the things that you could do with its platforms, that now they have a installed by default app called Tips to remind you of all the shit that you can now do. And even sometimes call back to, hey, remember, like, you might have missed it, but 5 years ago in iOS, we added this way to add widgets that you've probably forgotten about. So, but meanwhile, like, that same person, maybe they run into the issue of like their watch doesn't get every iMessage. Like, where's that tip? what I want is I want a bug zap from Apple that's like, yeah, our shit's super broken. So when you just autocomplete, like you type in a search, like my iMessages aren't showing on my Apple Watch, instead of getting the Apple support page, it's like, yeah, shit be fucked, yo. Like, here's a coupon. Here's a $5 off for a Taco Bell to apologize, because we're not going to fix that. So then anyway, yeah, there's a spectrum. That's about all the life stuff. Some follow-up. and here follow-up also, I guess, refers to self-promotion of shit that I'm doing. So I made my first new open source library of the year. First new Ruby gem. I think I might have made a couple other little things. I think it's my first new Ruby gem of the year. God, maybe I have done another one and I just already forgotten about it. This is the problem of being a write-only interface. I'm like, I don't even use the things I make for more than a little while, typically. So I made a new gem. It is called Dry Eraser, and it is a dry run for erasing models in your Rails application. So hence Dry Eraser. Basically, when you are when you're creating or updating a record in a Rails application, there's this really intensely awesome system called validations, where you can register for each attribute or for a model generally, any number of validations, like this field should be numeric, this field should always be present, or this field should be formatted in this particular way, so on and so forth. Or when this field is set, then this other column becomes required in this other way. What they've never had are validations for destroy operations. Like, for example, if I'm a piece of equipment, again, in this workout app, and a workout exercise depends on me, then you shouldn't be able to destroy me as a piece of equipment. Now, at the database level, we call that a foreign key constraint, and a default foreign key constraint just won't let you delete that equipment because it would create an orphan record, basically, where now you have a movement that is pointing to an ID of an equipment that doesn't exist. And so, like, many, many moons ago, databases realized, hey, it would be really good if we helped people avoid that particular foot gun. A foot gun is a gun that points at your foot. And they are not good, because then you'd shoot your foot. It's you know what? I don't know if foot gun is computer industry jargon, but yes, it would be a foot gun to be able to so easily delete something from a database and create an orphan record. And this is something that's, like, again, 30, 40, 50 years maybe of history in SQL, relational databases to prevent this. Ruby on Rails came around and they were like, nah, we don't need that. We're just going to treat the database like a hash, was what David said originally. I think to a certain degree, innovation requires a sort of true innovation where you're doing something really new needs a healthy level of disrespect for established patterns and truth. Like, if you really respect the old ways, you wouldn't be the one to do something radically new. And so I think it makes sense that it took Rails a long time to come around to a lot of these database level features like foreign key constraints. But they're there now, and you can configure them very easily when you're creating a database using just the Rails domain-specific language to map it out. But what it means is, if you have one of these constraints, like I did on equipment against movement, and then you delete the equipment, instead of getting a nice validation error, or giving me a way to provide the user with a nice validation error in a way that's consistent and easy, straightforward, it would just burp up a 500 server error because the Postgres database adapter would be like, yo, dude, that failed because of this foreign key constraint. And that's not something you want to barf out at a user. So then I'd have to catch it and then I'd have to show the user something else. But then repeat that for every other possible way that the destruction could fail of the model, the eraser, whatever. There's too many words. In Rails, we don't say delete because delete refers to deleting a record without calling all of the necessary callbacks before and afterwards that might be necessary. So we almost always want to call destroy. But then, of course, the HTTP method that we map to that destroy action is called delete. I've never been able to keep this shit straight, so I called my gem eraser. When you want to erase a thing, just know to do this. And then, of course, it actually does map to destroy, so it won't call, I don't think, it definitely won't call if you call delete. Don't call delete on your models, kids. So anyway, yes, what dry eraser does is it gives you a way to write new validations that are basically pre-flight conditions to make sure that before you destroy something, these conditions are met. And you can imagine the first one is, hey, check to make sure that no movements exist that depend on this equipment. And if they do, add this nice error message. And then what the gem will do is it'll abort the destroy operation and it'll return false. And then you can just show the user the errors. And it would look, now all your controller actions, whether it's create, update, or destroy, they all look very similar. This seemed like something that I was surprised wasn't in the framework, but I was glad to add something and contribute back, so to speak. And by contribute back, I mean solve my own problem and then make it not be part of this code base because it doesn't make sense in that code base, and then come up with a funny name, and then come up with a funny dolly image of a race car driver at an iMac rubbing a screen with an eraser. You know, it was a one-day project. Hopefully somebody finds it useful. Let's see. The other thing that I did, I just put out on my newsletter for March. That marks 12 newsletters. So I've been doing a monthly newsletter called Cereals of Wisdom. Cereals O Wisdom. It's a cereal that you don't want to eat. Yeah, I talked about something personal. I'm trying to explore personal facets, things from my childhood, things from my career that I don't normally talk about, to draw interesting lessons or contrast or provide some food for thought. And so I talked about my history of chronic back issues. Not always back pain, more so back immobility, and more recently back pain because my mobility is up because I'm so much more fit now. And I got more tools in my toolbox for increasing my mobility when it's poor, which then leads to pain. So anyway, I shared a little bit about that, what it's like to live with that. If you're listening to this, 50-50 odds or better, you deal with way, way worse chronic pain than I do. I think everyone's got something in their life that's just some latent background radiation of frustration, of discomfort. I'm sure everyone's got something. This is one of mine, and it was I would say a little cathartic to write about. A little bit depressing how fully I'd repressed a lot of my memories from college, because this knocked me on my ass for most of my sophomore year of college. And it's a small miracle that it got sorted in time for me to fly to Japan for a 7 month 6-month internship and semester abroad, because I only had a couple episodes when I was out there. Thank God. That would not have been great. So anyway, that's my newsletter. I got a lot of emails back saying, "Hey, sorry about your back pain," and I forgot that that I would get that reaction, because I was just sharing like, "Hey, here's this story." I wasn't looking for sympathy, but I appreciate sympathy, I guess. I just want everyone to know it's like I'm not laid out right now. I'm not, I'm fine. I think most of my problems in life boil down to I'd rather be better than fine, and sometimes fine is the best that I can manage. Another piece of follow-up that came up a little bit last week, we're talking about the AAA game industry of super high production, big budget game releases, and how it's not that they need a ton of programmers or a ton of game designers, meaning people who like figure out the levels and the story and all that, or the themes that make them so expensive. It's the art. It's that you need, like Ubisoft famously needs 3,000 artists to make an Assassin's Creed game. And those artists are making like, individual barrels, and the barrels that go on the European port look like this, and the barrels that go in the Iraqi or Persian ports look like this, and like I need to have at least 15 kinds of barrels in each so that it doesn't look too samey. And then it's next gen now. I need somebody to go and look at all of our old barrel models and figure out if I can add more polygons to the old barrels, or just slap on a new texture or upres the texture somehow, or do we need to go and assign some graphic designer, some 3D modeler to go spend a month of their life, rendering new barrels for this upcoming game. It's a lot of work. I would call it drudgery, a lot of clicking. Like I'm sure people love that work. I'm sure that they don't think about it as, man, I love fucking making 3D barrels, but I'm sure there are things that the folks in 3D rendering jobs really do love to model. And I'm sure that a lot of them do enjoy that work. And it's up until recently been, I think, a really lucrative job for a lot of people who don't have too many creative outlets or artistic outlets that can result in, a corporate gig that pays benefits. Anyway, so we're talking about how AI could disrupt it, right? Like, there's a lot of fear right now in that industry that AI generative tools combined with Epic and other engine providers looking to create cross-game, cross-publisher asset stores will reduce the demand for graphic developers, graphic designers, 3D modelers. There's a term here that I'm failing to remember, but there will be fewer art jobs for future games if AI makes it way, way easier to create 3D art, or if Epic or somebody else starts an asset store that really has photorealistic levels of 3D assets that are forward compatible and maintained going forward. And you can just buy that instead of hiring a whole bunch of people to re-render the universe for the 50th time. The thing that came across my desk here in the Justin Searles newsroom was an article, and I'll share this in the show notes. Oh, actually, no, it was a YouTube's that mentioned this, and then I went and found an archived article about it. Tron, not Tron Legacy, the 2012 remake or rebooty sequel thing, but the original Tron film had a ton of game-changing computer graphics in it. It had CGI. It had actually a lot of really manual stuff where they had to cut the film 15 times and then composite it so that they could make, for example, like everyone's suits look like they were emitting light and glowing. But because they used computers they were actually snubbed at the Oscars. The Academy did not nominate them for visual effects category. And in some retrospective after the fact, somebody at the Tron side, so who knows how true this is, said that they were snubbed because the Academy thought that they cheated by using computers. And you look up at contemporaneous reporting about computer graphics in early to mid 80s film, you had a lot of the same fear that like artists were going to get wiped out, that this wouldn't be a job anymore. The original Star Wars film, there was a famous painter hired who'd painted in lots and lots of painted background scenes for countless classic films of the 50s and 60s. They hired him to do those backgrounds in Star Wars. Like, we would never hire that person today, probably, is my guess, for a real modern film. So that's an example of a job that did go away with the advent of computer graphics. So yeah, some things did change. I just thought that the analogy was really interesting. That like here, Tron in the era of computer graphics coming around, like scared a lot of people that it was gonna, upset that industry, and that a lot of people would be out of work or a lot of jobs would go away. And of course, what we found was visual effect shots with 3D are so much more labor intensive that, if anything, the net amount of human labor exerted for any kind of blockbuster movie that's going to have a lot of visual effects shots, and I've heard it can be 1,500 in a film or whatever. It's a job creator in that sense. Now it's not necessarily the same people doing those jobs, and there's a generational shift, but it does make me wonder, like, what's this one going to look like, right? Like, you also look at those jobs, and this is true of a lot of gaming, 3D modeling jobs too, is like very often they're subcontracted. Very often the people that they subcontract to aren't paid particularly well. Very often they don't make benefits. Very often they're pushed to make outrageous deadlines, and so they're worked to the bone. I think a lot of people in sort of corporatized art jobs are in that kind of mode. If you ever looked into what it's like to be a manga or an anime artist in Japan, and then you thought to yourself, I really still want to do this job, you are not screwed together right, because it is a field rife with abuse. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I thought it was interesting to hear that the same stuff that we're all flipped out about now is stuff people were flipped out about 30 years ago, and then the change happened. And I won't say that it was all fine, but it happened. And so it seems like a category of life where you're better off reacting well than trying to hold up your arms and prevent the tidal floods from reaching you. Because these are big macro changes that aren't going to be stopped by a handful of protesters. So cool. That's all I got for follow up. We're cooking with gas today. It's only 40 some minutes, and here we are. I've got a new pun for you. This is the Aaron Patterson Memorial pun. He texted me at like midnight my time. Not with the pun. He actually texted the pun several days ago, but he was stuck in Atlanta airport, Hartfield Jackson Airport, because his flight to Brazil was delayed many hours, and I think finally took off after 1 a.m. So this goes out to a sleepy Aaron Patterson who is sharing a pun with us, and here I am. I'm going to invisible ink wipe it away. Whew. Oh, get ready. Get ready. Did you know that en garde is French? I learned that while studying on Duolingo. Did you know that en garde? En garde. Did you know that en garde is French? I learned that while studying on Duolingo. So yeah, if you don't get that one, it's Becky frequently comments on these puns. It's like Aaron's puns are written to be read with eyeballs and not necessarily delivered in audio. So this is a classic example of, if I'm not pronouncing duel exactly how you'd want to hear it, DUEL, as in we are dueling, like a sword fight. Instead of Duolingo, which is the language learning app. So I think we definitely deduct a point or two because it is not a very audio format friendly pun. But I gotta say, the fundamentals of this pun are strong. Here we are. We're on April 2nd, 2024. This is our 9th pun. And now I got to look at the list and see where this one lands. I would say this is better than version 5's Aren't Progressive Web Apps Just Liberal Media? I would say that as a pun, this pun is probably also better than version 3's I wonder what tapas restaurants have to say about this EU App Store ruling. But I would not say this is better than I loved playing AAA games as a kid, but replacing the batteries got real expensive. So I think this is our new number 4. Number 4 pun. Yeah, good job, Aaron. Congratulations on the pun. I separately watched, I think it was Real Engineering or something, had a YouTube about the how the Game Boy, original Game Boy, was engineered, and it was amazing because I had both a Game Boy and a Game Gear, and they talked about the power consumption. Of course, Game Gear took 6 AA's and Game Boy took 4 AA's, but me and my like elementary school aged brain failed to realize that, like, oh man, I knew the Game Gear sucked batteries dry really fast, and that the Game Boy sipped power because those four batteries would last a long time. But I don't think I ever really thought very hard about it as like it was the individual components. I definitely thought like, well, the Game Gear is a color screen and the screen lights up. And I maybe that's where most of this power came. Maybe I should give my child self more credit. I was definitely thinking about that. I was like, well, the Game Gear, though, you could play in the dark or play in the back of a car when it was dark out. And that was a large proportion of my mobile gaming time, is in the back seat. But yeah, it was, I think that they said when you look at the prices of AA's in the early 90s, the Game Gear was like the equivalent of like $1.60 an hour to play it because AA's were so expensive. I don't know if that's inflation adjusted either. I kind of wonder if it might be not. I think it might not be, which means it would only be more expensive. Whereas the Game Boy was only like 16 to 25 cents per hour. So that makes the I loved playing AAA games as a kid, but replacing those batteries got real expensive take pun even more. It hits even harder now. So thanks for that, Aaron. All right, well, I guess it's time for news. I didn't want to share this one, but I'm gonna. I don't know if you listen to lots of middle-aged white dudes rambling by themselves for 3-hour podcasts, but if you do, the top podcast chart suggests that there's pretty good odds that one of those people is Huberman. Andrew Huberman has a pseudoscience podcast where he riffs about optimizing and perfecting his life, but in a science flavored goop kind of way. And lots of people like it because he uses phrases like evidence backed. I realize I should have done a better setup where I didn't give away that I thought this guy was kind of a quack, but I had he gave off a lot of quack vibes, and I got a lot of people who send me links to stuff, and it really felt like, you know, so Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, where it's all just, you know, astrology and bullshit and vibes and you know, wellness, and the word nature is used a lot in to sell not very natural snake oil. The same products would often be sold by Alex Jones InfoWars, but just labeled in that case as being masculine, or like, this is about restoring men's vital energy, and you like look at the ingredients list. And John Oliver did a segment on this once where they were the same shit. I feel like Andrew Huberman has carved out as a top 5 podcast by being third leg of the stool for, well, I'm not a, you know, a gun-toting prepper fomenting a revolution of the United States in some rural enclave. And I'm not a potato farming hippie on a commune trying to reject the established, you know, medical industrial complex and instead put crystals in my vagina to restore freshness, or whatever the fuck Gwyneth Paltrow and Jessica Alba are selling. No, I am an educated man. I need some science. I need some research-backed, evidence-based stuff to tell me how to fill the goddamn void in my soul. How to not feel like shit when I wake up. How to feel like I'm getting better every day. How to fend off the feeling that like I'm taking steps back, or that my life's decelerating, or that age is catching up to me, or that people don't love me as much as I wish they'd love me. And Huberman was there because he is a neuroscientist and he is a professor at Stanford. And so he had and he's got a big, deep voice, and he's got a big stock. I will give him this. A man with a thick neck, it conveys a certain amount of gravitas. And he's got a thick fucking neck, and he's jacked. And apparently, according to the New York Magazine, ladies find him attractive because he's got a veritable harem of girlfriends that he's been lying to and claiming to be exclusive, talking about wanting to have kids with. His only true love, according to this New York Magazine, you know, I'll get to that, but his only true love is Costello, his silly little stupid dog. Fucking look, like, has a girlfriend, is literally taking her camping, injecting her himself. He's a doctor. He's a neuroscientist. It's okay that he's injecting her with IVF stuff. I don't know. Like, look, maybe that was okay. I don't know. It seemed weird. And in fact, that's really my takeaway is like, you read this whole article, it's 8,000 words. I didn't know very much about the guy. I'll be honest. I read the article and I was like, you know what? Yeah, sounds kind of shitty to cheat on girlfriends 8 ways to Tuesday. Didn't break a law. But the real story to me is that, like, he does not have shit figured out. He is super, like, you know, he's not super even keeled. He's like conspiratorial, lashes out, prone to violence, anger, not physical violence, but like definitely emotional abuse. Like, a lot of the behaviors demonstrated there are even just like basic shit, like ignoring people or making plans and then flaking on them. So repeatedly it becomes his reputation. But then to go on a podcast and act like he's got shit figured out right, for 3 hours and uses a tone and a science flavored bullshit, generator that enraptures people and says, finally, somebody is giving me this soma, this feeling of me having a better way, ideas for how to improve my sleep, ideas for how, like everyone's trying to improve across the same 50 vectors, but we need one that resonates with our vibe. And if you're not a gun-toting, conservative wingnut, and if you're not a lolly foo-foo hippy dippy, Gwyneth Paltrow stan, if you got the same needs and you're looking outside yourself to meet those needs, and you don't have some other parasocial relationship with an influencer, Huberman could fit the bill for a lot of people, and apparently he has. So the reason I felt like this was super newsworthy is because this guy's a fucking weirdo. Doesn't sound like somebody I'd want to count as a good friend. Doesn't sound like somebody who I would look at and say, he's got it figured out. But when all you ever see is him in interviews or him on a podcast mic acting like he knows all his shit, that's why I think this is newsworthy. It's like it exposed hypocrisy. Clearly doesn't have it figured out. Clearly there's a scared little boy inside of this man. Clearly he is the target recipient of a lot of his bullshit to make himself feel better. It's so obvious. A lot of people who are big Huberman stans probably feel bad, probably feel hoodwinked, but probably a lot more feel like they need to defend the guy. Hey, he had a hard childhood. Hey, this and that. Hey, this was a hit job. I had so many dudes in my life dudes, friends, you might say, who immediately were like, that's a hit job. And I was like, well, if a hit job hits, if you hire an assassin to kill somebody and then they kill them, yes, that's a hit job, but it was a successful hit job. So yes, imagine New York Magazine hired a reporter on freelance to go and just find dirt on somebody and then publish it. If the dirt sticks, it's still dirt. It's just brought up now. To a certain extent, I don't know what the phrase hit job means to somebody. If it's clear that a lot of the stuff, there's numerous sources, there's, a trail of documentary evidence. And New York Magazine's I'm sure they fact checked the shit out of this thing before they made it a cover story. It's a culture magazine. They comment on this kind of stuff. And it wasn't an editorial. It was hard reporting as far as anyone knows. If it was a hit job and your guy got hit, I'm sorry. He got hit. Anyway, I'll have a link to the article if you haven't read it. It's a fascinating read. It's one of those, it reads like if you've ever read a really, really long dramatic Reddit thread of an Am I the Asshole thread, or about a really fucked relationship. It's more like that than most other kinds of magazine articles you'd read. So yeah, the Rogan sphere of, you imagine the sort of the Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, all of the constellation of not alt-right, but alt-right curious, men's media. They've all circled the wagon around this guy. Even, a lot of ostensibly moderate left of center or like ostensibly apolitical outlets. Like it's really just a boys club, and they've all come to, you know, call it a hit job. It's like they've got talking points. I'm sure he's working behind the scenes to say, hey man, you gotta back me up here. And of course, like if you live outside that constellation like I do, because I don't listen to any of these people, it sure looks like projection of like, oh man, if this happened to him and he's less crazy than me, or he's more upstanding than me, or I've got more girlfriends than he did. Boy, when they come for me, I'm fucked. So that, it looks like that. It looks shitty. But that's, you zoom out and you look at like where, how attitudes have changed and how like the gender divide that we've seen emerge politically and culturally among men and women, as like economic fortunes for women have gotten way, way better, and for young men have stagnated or gotten worse. And the political, like, understandable political radicalization that's resulted from starting with Trump's election through Dobbs. A lot more women are politically active, and more committed to progressive candidates than ever before. And with the sort of incel vibes of a lot of men feeling like, you know, they're especially white men feeling like their prospects are worse than their parents. Maybe they haven't gone to college, or they did and they're just up to their eyeballs in debt, or they haven't had a successful career because of the various turbulences that we've experienced from the 2008 collapse and COVID. Whatever it is, like a lot of men feel disaffected and they're looking outside themselves for a hero or for something that they can believe in. And Huberman's one of those people, and Rogan's one of those people, and that's where they find an affiliation. And it leads to more individual, it gives them an explanation for like, you know, this is why my life's shit. That doesn't force them to explain it in terms of any of their own personal failings or anything where like it's just the system and there's nothing to be done. It gives them foils, whether that's, it might not literally be the other, it might not be some other race, but it might be like, yeah, that's why affirmative action is fucking me, or whatever it is. So I was neutral about Huberman before I read that article, and now I'm just like, oh yeah, he's just another one of those dudes. All right. You could say my goal in starting this podcast is to be the only white dude on a podcast who's not secretly a dirtbag doing a solo multi-hour podcast. Like, cause I'm like, first of all, I am less of a dirtbag than it sounds like these guys are, having not broken any laws knowingly, never cheated on my taxes, never cheated on my wife. You know, if you were to write a hit piece on me, it would be a pretty boring read. But even saying that, I am very out and proud as a dirtbag. I am a piece of shit. I've spent hours on this program, which only has 9 episodes, talking about how much I'm a piece of shit. Like I'm selfish, I'm egomaniacal, I'm narcissistic. I only think about myself. The whole world revolves around me. I'm only here talking to this microphone because I like the sound of my own voice. I will go for a run tomorrow and I will listen to my own podcast, and I will be listening to this part and thinking, boy, that was a little too true, but fair point. And if other people are along for the goddamn ride, then that's wonderful. But I'm under no delusions that I'm here to help people. And I'm also like, you know, blessedly, I'm not doing this podcast for any sort of financial purpose. I'm not, you know, this is a zero revenue production for me. It's, you know, there's no sponsors. I don't owe anyone anything. If nobody listens, I don't lose anything. And if lots of people listens, if lots of people listens, then honestly, it would probably just create more problems for me. First of all, I'd have a lot of angry goopers in my face, but Yep. Anyway, if you prefer your wellness pseudoscience to be science flavored as opposed to goop flavored, another good article that was not the New York Mag but was written by a scientist. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot on Slate, named Andrea Love. Talks about how, really Huberman is just Dr. Oz for a different demo, which I'm sure would really piss off a lot of Huber. What do we call them? Huber bros? No, I don't mean to gender. I know a lot, at least the 14 women he was sleeping with liked him. He's apparently popular with the ladies. I say that to mean, like, if you read this 8,000 word piece, he does have like a whole TikTok of just women who find him attractive. I don't think I've got a hashtag on TikTok dedicated to me as a sex symbol yet. But if I do, it's podcast at searles.co. Let me know. I'll have Becky screen it first. You can write in about anything you want here, including this issue. If you think Huberman was the victim of a hit job, please write in so I can acknowledge a receipt of your take. Moving right along, this is the meat and potatoes here to talk about today. The Atlantic had two pieces, and I wonder whether or not that the two people talked to each other. The first piece, written by Ian Bogost, and the second piece, written by Louise Matsakis. I'm realizing I'm worse at last name guessing than I thought. Well, the first one was March 19th, the second one was March 24th. I don't know if they talked to each other, but it's really interesting because the first one is titled Universities Have a Computer Science Problem. And the thesis of this piece is unsatisfying to me, but the lead is fantastic. It says total enrollment in language courses other than English at American colleges. Wait, nope. Shoot. Got the wrong one. I'm going to talk about the CS one first. Got the wrong quote. I would say I'd fix that in post, but that's not the kind of show I run here. I got to do it live. And by live, I mean recorded, but not edited. All right. So the lead here, 18% of Stanford University seniors graduated with a degree in computer science, more than double the proportion of just a decade earlier. Over the same period at MIT, that rate went up from 23% to 42%. That is a lot of computer science grads. And when you scroll in, you see, like, what did we expect from a decade plus of telling people learn to code? If every person who'd been laid off in every sector over the last 12, 15 years was told to learn to code, parents get the message that, like, well, if I'm going to pay these increasingly exorbitant tuition fees, I want to steer my child towards a major that will remunerate them well enough to pay off their loans, maybe even take care of me someday. An increasingly difficult gambit economically in the US. So we're seeing more CS degrees than ever. And we're nevertheless running into, and the thing that was surprised me about this piece was it was about, like, it wasn't about the economics of, like, whether or not programmers are going to actually have a good job ahead of them, because, like, we've seen tremendous layoffs at a lot of tech companies. A lot of tech companies in the post Elon Musk Twitter era, in the post COVID, when the recession scare was happening, a lot of investors wanted all these companies to take a haircut to show that they would, basically, hey, Meta, hey, Disney, give us a pound of flesh, show that you're cutting back, tightening the belt, all these euphemisms, because we have a recession coming. Of course, the recession didn't come. Biden's administration, the economy, pulled off the very low probability soft landing, quote unquote, that the Fed suggested might be possible with their particular strategy around keeping interest rates where they were. Nevertheless, we're seeing a lot of layoffs still. And to hear that CS graduates are going to be in the hundreds of thousands this year in the US, where it was only, 40,000 or so when I graduated. And I walked into an economy where like a ton of them didn't get jobs, or got jobs, and then a year later the financial collapse occurred and tons of them lost those jobs. I got super lucky. I was barely able to survive the layoffs at the firm that I worked out after college. But yes, we have more programmer demand than ever. But like, man, like when I read that lead, I was like, this is clearly going to be about how there's now a mismatch, and there's going to be a glut of students coming out who have studied computer science and not nearly enough jobs prepared to take them. And famously, computer science is a discipline where the people who graduate are not necessarily very well prepared to be application developers or programmers. And every company typically that has a lot of custom software, it's all so bespoke and custom and labyrinthian in its complexity that even when they do hire you, there's a 1 to 2 to 3 year on ramp of your ability to be productive, net productive relative to the costs. So I thought that's what it was going to be about. Instead, it was about how universities themselves are struggling and how CS is increasingly being sequestered into engineering schools and colleges, where it's more vocational and much more computers for computer's sake and less about the humane side of it, where it's actually really weird reading this thing because they talk about University of Michigan, and that's where I almost went. I got what did they call it? I got one of the higher end scholarships to go to the University of Michigan. And they had two main schools of interest, literature, science, and arts, referred to as LS&A, and the School of Engineering. The School of Engineering is like far away. Physically, it's on the north side of Ann Arbor, Michigan. The LS&A school is more in the traditional campus with the quad, with the diag, And I wanted to study computer science and Japanese. And I was told pretty much immediately that would be impossible because computer science was in the engineering school. And, of course, foreign languages were in LS&A. And even if I could find an advisor who'd authorize that, my schedule would be a goddamn mess. And I'd have to be commuting back and forth between these two kind of mini campus areas. They just said, like, don't do it. What this article shows is, like, apparently, in somehow the intervening time, LS&A wants computer science back because there's just so much of humanity getting encoded into computers such that it's like the vast majority of programmers are not doing science. They're not doing like a hard technical problem. They're doing hard human problems of figuring out how to translate our human experiences and processes and systems into something that's automated, which requires much better communication skills. And honestly, having ultimately not going to University of Michigan, but instead going to a small liberal arts school that had no problem with me studying a huge liberal arts core and computer science and Japanese, I felt so much better served by that program than all of my classmates. I grew up right near Ann Arbor, so I knew dozens and dozens of people who went to University of Michigan, many of them who majored in computer science. And the arc of my career looks a lot different than the arc of their career. Not to say that none of them have been successful. Many of them have been very successful. But like they are on the individual contributor track, and they are at technical companies. The ones who've been successful, that's the path that they took. And as far as I know, that's where they wanted to be, and that's great. But for the shit that I've done in my career, all the liberal arts was way more useful in helping me figure out, like the computer science was a catalyst. It's like, do I know how to program well enough to not make the computer fall over on itself? Yes. good. That is a foundation. Everything that I need on a day-to-day basis in terms of communicating with clients or understanding the politics of an organization, or understanding, the broader interpersonal problems or systemic issues that if I were just to naively encode into a computer would just perpetuate and make eternal what might just be a fucked up communication network. All of those things, being able to see a forest for the trees, is thanks to my liberal arts education. And so this is actually like the article is making a good point, but probably 20 years too late. I guess it's never too late to fix something. But really, like, I'm looking at this, and the problem is the number. I don't know if I would recommend somebody go to college and study CS right now. And it's not because we're not going to need programmers. It's because the people hiring programmers don't know if we're going to need programmers, or are skeptical. And so I think that's why layoffs have been so much more durable in tech than in other sectors, is once they cut the jobs, there's no appetite to hire back, because every 6 months we see LLMs and AI do something we never thought they'd see. So why would you hire somebody where you might have to take an absolute bath, a write down, like whether you're talking about like hiring and like all the mechanics of that, and then the severance and everything, only to fire them again a year later because it turns out AI could do the job? That's the brainworm that I think a lot of executives are tech executives are currently infected with. But I don't think that's really what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is a lot of companies that have cut back the number of developers they have are going to, whether they acknowledge or understand this is what's happening, they're going to go from, say, 2,000 people to 1,000 people. And I'm going to do some quick math here. The handshake problem. So 2,000 people times 1999 divided by 2 is 1.999 million connections, versus 1,000 people times 999 divided by 2 is 499,000 connections. So 4 times as many connections. Like I'm referring to the handshake problem, right? So like if I've got a staff of 2,000 people, wait, did I do this math right? Now I got to look it up. Well, now here I am. Handshake problem. It's a geometric growth. Yes. Okay. I did get the math right. So a couple million connections. There are 2 million potential relationships in a 2,000 person group. There are 500,000 potential relationships in a 1,000 person group. That's what the calculator that I typed into my computer said. But just for the purposes of this conversation, just imagine that like it grows super linearly. Like every individual person, if I am like if I am the 1,001st employee at a company, there's like 1,000 new connections that might get made in this sort of like network. If you imagine a social graph, which is a thing that programmers are newly much more aware of. If I'm the 2,001st employee at a company, now I've added 2,000 connections to the graph. And I don't know about you, but on a team bigger than 6, I start to feel the pain of having many more connections to manage. Because now, in order to get consensus, I need everyone on the same page. And there are ways in large organizations, certainly once you get to the point of 1,000 or 2,000 people, where you're going to be breaking it up. We're breaking up in departments or business units or teams, different levels of striations of middle management. I think a lot of companies who cut back from, say, 2,000 to 1,000 are going to realize, like, wow, decisions are happening faster. We have like less bureaucratic mess, things that, used to take a long time to either make decisions, or the amount of rework that would happen where one department would build a thing and another department would either build the same thing or build a thing in another area that would conflict with the priorities of this other thing. All of the things about how we plan work and do the work, perform the work, are made easier when you have a smaller communication graph. And so I believe, and I've believed this for a long time, that a lot of these companies that were hiring so many developers, it wasn't that, oh, insert tech company here shouldn't need this many developers to keep running. That's not what I might have said it at times. What I really meant was there will be a point in every company where each additional person that they hire is going to so increase the increased communication cost that additional marginal person represents is going to be higher than that individual person's net productivity contributing back to the company. And that's not about the individual, right? It's not an indictment of the individual. We're talking about aggregates. It's about the system that exists. And this is something that's literally what Mythical Man Month by Fred Brooks, the classic collection of essays of his work building OS 360, system 360 for IBM as a project lead. It's literally what he says in there. So my worry is a lot of tech executives thinking that this is an AI thing are going to realize that after having cut a lot of jobs, it's really just a smaller teams move faster thing. Because it means that when it's time to hire again, or when they're going to form their next company, or when they're doing their next reorg, they might misattribute any perceived gains in organizational effectiveness to AI and then overcorrect as a result. Oh, well, let's just turn the knob further, right? So all that to say, I don't like the next 5 to 10 year prospects for developers because I think the AI bubble is going to take at least 5 years to resolve, whether it's a burst, like autonomous driving has been, or whether it's some new reality we can't really quite imagine yet that still probably does require a lot of computer people. I wouldn't feel good if I was a CS grad right now, and I definitely don't feel good hearing that 42% of MIT grads are. But it makes me really wonder, because that's still in absolute terms a relatively small number, makes me really wonder at the average state school, we're talking about several 100,000 CS grads a year. I just don't know if there's going to be that many jobs for everybody. So universities do have a CS problem, but it's not just this liberal arts thing. It's I don't know that there's going to be enough work for everyone to keep having. But look, now this is something that I have said on podcasts before. I have believed for years that programmers, by my first projects, right, were take a manual process and make it mostly automated or mostly mediated with computers. Take a paper form and then make it an e-form. And it was pretty simple stuff, but in each of those projects, a few jobs would disappear or would the work of 4 manual tasks, people, task doers would be replaced with 1 more technical person. And that was an economic efficiency. But then when you fast forward and you'd see paralegal departments staffing up to do a whole lot of work that had previously been done by companies, and then you'd introduce e-discovery tools, and this is back in 2010, e-discovery tools, and then oh, well, I can get rid of this many paralegals because now I've got a search engine for everything that's in Discovery. Now with AI, we're literally, seeing accountants, partners at law firms be hey, the output I can get from GPT-4 is better than most of my fresh out law grads. And not only do I only pay $20 a month for the privilege, I don't have to train them. The org can stay smaller. So I've been saying for a long time, probably 13 years, that programmers are going to turn the lights off on the American middle class. And I believe that I have been proven right in that. It's coming for you. It's coming for all these other professions. not AI specifically, but just the degree to which the economy has become oil and water of moneyed interests and capital on one end, and some sort of gig worker thing at the other that doesn't have to pay people really good money. And so I don't know what the end game is. I don't mean to be too doom and gloom about it, but it would make sense that the late stage of that transition would be everyone rushes to computer science, because at a late breaking moment, everyone would realize, oh shit, programmers are the only ones who are making good money, which is where we've been the last few years. So I should be a programmer too. And that's clearly not sustainable, but it would definitely be in something you would predict if it was the case that programmers are basically doing the work of capital to obviate the need of most labor, especially in the knowledge economy where we don't need robots with arms and legs and shit. Is that something to feel bad about? I don't know. Feel how you want to feel. But, if I was in the decision to help guide somebody as to what job to get or whether to go to a 4-year college or whatever, I would be factoring in this. Speaking of 4-year degrees, Atlantic had another article, the end of foreign language education. You might remember part of this article because I began misreading this quote when I meant to be reading the other one. This one starts off, well, no, it's kind of buried. It says total enrollment in language courses other than English at American colleges decreased 29.3% from 2009 to 2021. In Australia, only 8.6% of high school seniors were studying a foreign language as of 2021. And I've heard similar reports, because Becky used to be a Spanish teacher in K-12 in the U.S., of drastically declined enrollment of foreign language education in the K-12 system, expedited by COVID, and all of the shakeups in the availability of teachers and budgets. So not a lot of people are studying foreign languages. And, this has got other AI vibes to it. First of all, it's, if people are moving away from liberal arts generally to try to chase that sweet programmer money, it would make sense that they would also de-emphasize foreign language, because that's squarely in the liberal arts. But also, if you're worried about AI or you're thinking about AI and you're you saw that demo where Google has the goggles with the subtitles in real time that would translate for you, or if you're thinking about, and I think it's fair to predict this, the Apple Vision Pro future where everyone's just got spectacles on, what's the most obvious augmentation that we can have? It's subtitles for reality. You fly to another country, you don't know the language, then its microphone hears that language and then it shows you subtitles in your language. And there you go. Congratulations. We've solved foreign language education. I think a lot of people have that vibe, right? That is coming. And it's coming at a time where a lot of developed nations' economies are becoming more isolationist. So there's an isolationist bent where just at this moment of, whatever, the thermostatic reaction to neoliberal globalist approaches to operating on a global economy with really free trade between everybody all the time, and how that would be highly efficient. And it was for capital. This is a highly political podcast, turns out. Am I going too far here? There's currently a lot of people who would rather, close borders right now than there were 10 years ago, and who don't see it as an unalloyed good to think about cross-cultural engagement. So whereas here's an example, 13 years ago, 12 years ago, talking to other K-12 teachers who taught German or French, they were worried because it doesn't make sense to learn German or French. Like they were thinking our district could have or should have a Chinese language program because the youth of today who are going to college, who are going to go into MBA programs, they should learn Chinese because that's the language of the future of business, of like, like on a global stage. And of course, now, not that much time has passed. I think a lot of people would feel very differently about that. Because global economy has just become less appealing and less part of the like assumed. This is less in the zeitgeist. So fewer people taking foreign language. And I honestly don't know how to feel about it on one hand. I think that like foreign language education is a huge part of my life. But when I was just taking German in high school because somebody told me to take German, I could not have cared less. Like, it was a curiosity. It was kind of like a fun game here and there, but it wasn't practical. I wasn't super engaged. It didn't solve a problem for me or for anyone else for me to be able to speak German. Did it stretch my brain and make my, connect some neurons that otherwise wouldn't have been connected? I don't know, maybe. Is there a general benefit in understanding another country or culture, or people and their perspectives? Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure I got a little bit of that in the, couple of semesters that I took in high school. There are other ways to get that too. But it was only really when I actually wanted to learn for my own sake another foreign language in Japanese so that I could travel, so that I could, participate in that society, so that I could make friends and make connections. And so I could truly, like, out of my own intrinsic motivation, see the world from other perspectives and engage with other cultures that were very different from mine. Then it was super duper useful to me. If I could have a pair of glasses that would translate all of the German that I hear when I'm in Germany and provide me with subtitles at the bottom of my field of view, I would be down. I'd be like, cool. That would make traveling in Germany probably a little bit easier. As if 90% of the people that you meet in Germany don't already speak fluent English. So at the same time, I would probably never wear those goggles in Japan because they would prevent me from, even as like a intermediate skilled Japanese speaker, they would inhibit my ability to listen and memorize because I'd be reading a translation. I wouldn't be actually listening. And especially when you consider things like word order changes between languages, like there's just like, if you're listening to like, I don't know, like a Korean drama in Korean, but you're reading the subtitles in English and you think you're learning Korean, you're probably fooling yourself. So I would personally forego that tool, right? But would I use a tool where I would see the Japanese subtitles in real life? Like, yeah, maybe. Like very often, especially if I'm talking to children, talking to elderly people, talking to gangsters, all three of those groups, they have very specific slang and it's harder for me to pick out what they're saying. So sometimes I just kind of tune out altogether, and that's clearly worse than being able to at least check my understanding by reading in real time. So like these tools aren't good or bad. What I think is interesting about this discussion that there's fewer people studying foreign languages, like it makes me wonder whether or not in the quest to, and a lot of this has been about college admissions. Like, hey, if you want to get into college, you got to take 2 years of a foreign language was what I was told. All these things that we use as proxies to mean something, like as a proxy for global understanding or as a proxy for hardworking student, you should take foreign language. Becomes, just simply, you should take foreign language. And because there's some sort of like irreducible good to taking a foreign language class. And I think that's become part of the ideology today, right? Among educated people is like, well, foreign language education is good and fewer people are studying foreign language. And so that must be bad. And I don't feel like it's that straightforward. It feels way more to me like if we're about to hit a point of universal translator Star Trek kind of shit, then continuing to push people through foreign language classes would be similar to, you know, the way I see it is it's very much like, I'm sure when automobiles hit the scene and people with horse-drawn carriages were like, but what about all of the chauffeurs of these carriages and the people taking care of the horses? You know, will horses go extinct? And of course the answer is like, no, horses will not go extinct. But instead of just being a thing that everyone kind of has to do to participate in this society or this economy, it'll become a thing that only the people who actually care about horses will engage with, right? So like, there's still plenty of horse people out there. Horses didn't go extinct. And if anything, horses just became more expensive and more carefully doted after. And the horse economy now just targets those, the people who are really, really into horse stuff. And trust me, like, they're all doing fine. If you've got any family members who are into horse stuff, you understand how expensive all that shit is. So horses didn't disappear, but the market changed from everybody needs a horse, or everybody needs, you know, like access to a horse-drawn carriage to be able to get around efficiently, to horses are optional. And if you want a horse, you need a reason to want a horse. And that's where I think we're probably heading. Because for me, like I just said, when I had a reason to learn another language, and that reason would not have been satisfied by a universal translator. Because no matter how good your universal translator is, it's never going to fully be able to educate you as to cultural differences. Sometimes they do a really good job. Like AI-based ones will do a good job of, like, I like DeepL is a good translator. It'll do a good job of taking nuance and spinning it so that it makes sense, or taking idioms and like finding analogous idioms. But it's not quite the same as understanding, you know, hey, you should take your shoes off when you enter a home in Japan, right? Like certain things, and of course that's the most basic one, require you to just be there, live, understand. And certain things linguistically, like how you structure sentences, would be difficult to replicate no matter how good your universal translator was. But that's kind of beside the point, because being able to have an unassisted, real communication, a real connection with somebody kind of requires that it not be mediated by a thing on your face. If we get to the point where everyone's just popping in babble fishes into their ears and you can't see it and everyone sounds the same, right? Like, then we'll talk about whether or not it's truly stupid to spend the time to learn a foreign language. But like, I think we're quite a ways away from that. So for now, I feel like pretty good about foreign language education for me, because I just don't think it's going to go away. I think the budgets will decrease and we'll have fewer foreign language teachers, and it's probably, you know, similar to the decline of the arts in K-12 education. Probably see a lot of budget cuts. It'll be difficult to decide which languages to teach in schools. You know, colleges may require them less if AI really takes over and it becomes less pragmatic to feel like you need to know a language for any sort of functional business economic reason. But I sure hope that, you know, and this is one of the areas where I really want to build custom applications, not Duolingo, but something of that vibe maybe, to help people learn foreign languages who just really want to learn them, who want to engage with other cultures. So I was like less scared about that story. And that story is more about, you know, it's about what you think it's about. All right. How are we doing on time? As you know, I run a really tight ship time wise. Let's move on to recommendations. I had another story, but I'm gonna save that for later. And honestly, I think it would only aggravate more people than might be already annoyed about the Huberman stuff. One recommendation, Stardew Valley. It's a brand new game that is inspired by the SNES classic Harvest Moon. Stardew Valley is now probably 10 years old or older. It's a farming simulation slash role-playing game. You start a farm, you farm on your farm, you make friends, you can even get married. You collect things, you contribute back to a community, and so on and so forth. It just had a big release 1.6 update. Every couple of years, the creator has pushed out a huge content update to dramatically extend the game to the point now where, like, to see everything, to do everything, you're talking probably a minimum of 200 hours. And so if you're into that kind of thing, if you like watching numbers go up, and you got a lot of time on your hands, it's a great way to spend it. I fell off the game. I played it when it came out. Played it a couple years later when it hit Switch. I played it a couple years after that on my iPhone with like one of those controllers that you kind of snap onto your iPhone. And I was hoping to play it again on my iPad with a controller like a PS5 controller, and it was just buggy as shit. And of course, the new 1.6 update will probably take another year or so to even come out for it. So I was like, man, I want to play this, but I don't want to be like sitting at my PC or playing on a couch all the time. But I'd like to be able to play from my iPad. And so I went on this adventure of trying to figure out how to stream Steam, the game library, from my MacBook Air to my iPad. And that went very poorly, it turns out. Steam Link is not very well supported on macOS, it turns out. It cannot change the resolution like it can on Windows because it can only look at the supported resolutions, which are an increasingly small number of definitely not 16:9 and definitely not 4:3, which is the aspect ratio of the iPad. So it's going to be all letterboxed and stuff. But things like sound don't work. Just lots of issues. So that was no good. I actually stumbled on what I think is a funny way to play a game, which is I was in my Vision Pro and I just played the game using the Mac Virtual Display. And then my headphone was just paired with the Mac. So I was able to play in Vision Pro with a gigantic 130-inch equivalent screen. And I wanted to play then with a controller. But of course, the controller support is broken now for some other unrelated reason. Like, this is why people don't play games on the Mac. So because and I checked Reddit and other people are confirming that the controllers aren't working on Mac OS. And when I turned on Steam input, it would just crash. So I played with mouse and keyboard or trackpad and keyboard on my MacBook in the Vision Pro. And it was actually a really cool experience. It worked well. And I could put YouTube, like a YouTube video up at the top above the screen, or I could do a side-by-side and then emulate what I've been doing for the last 20 plus years of playing a game and watching a thing simultaneously. So it was the first time I did anything that approximates a video game playing on Vision Pro. Of course, I'd much rather have immersive experiences and play AAA VR games on it, but that's not happening just yet. Although there's a couple open source experiments to try to make that a thing. So that was pretty fun. Steam has like cloud syncing save games, so I can do that on my MacBook Air, and then I can also play on my PC. So I'm playing a lot of Stardew Valley and then watching some TV. One thing in my quest to try to figure out how to stream this, once it became clear that Steam Link wasn't going to be the solution, is NVIDIA has a service called GeForce Now, and you can pay like $10 a month and then have access to your library and play games. And so I signed up for a trial. I got GeForce Now on my iPad. I linked up my Steam account. I clicked open Stardew Valley, and it was impressive because the pre-configurations were what you would want. They were 4:3. So like it picked a good resolution for me. It looked pretty good. It sounded correct. It worked with my controller, despite being like, Safari app. All that was great, except even with an awesome internet connection, it would still stutter. You'd be walking and then it would go clunk, clunk, and you'd miss a lot of frames or whatever. There'd be lag. So it was a case of like, similar to a lot of stuff right now, like AI, like automated driving, like autonomous vehicles, like the Vision Pro, NVIDIA GeForce Now is absolutely unbelievable and simultaneously nowhere near good enough. Like, I feel like maybe we just did all the easy stuff with computers, and we closed the book on most of them 10 years ago. And now the only interesting problems left are these just dastardly difficult problems where getting from 0 to 80 takes orders of magnitude less effort than getting from 80 to 100. So it feels like I'm looking around my room, I'm surrounded by elaborate tech demos and not real products that I would ever come to really rely on. So lots of that going around. Other recommendation this version, True Detective Season 4. If you've followed the True Detective series on, it's an anthology series where every season is a completely different story over on Max. Don't call it HBO Max, just Max. It's pretty good. Season 3 was probably my favorite. This one's got Jodie Foster up in Alaska. It's very much of the time, right? Like, economy is really hard. Lots of tensions between indigenous communities and the I think entirely white group of Americans who live there. So those tensions I think are really interesting. Jodie Foster is a great actor. It's pretty good. I don't know. Like, it's nice to have some prestige television that is self-contained, right? Where I like these anthology series because I know I can watch it and then be done with it and put it on the shelf and maybe come back to it years from now, and it doesn't have to fit into a 10-year arc. Like I saw a poster that indicated The Walking Dead is still happening. Like, I fell off that so long ago that I don't even. So anyway, True Detective Season 4, not bad. It's actually a little scary. Playing that late at night in the dark. If I wasn't simultaneously playing a super cute farming sim, it might have gotten me a little spooked. So if you spook easily, maybe no True Detective Season 4. But if you're looking for a spook, it might not be spooky enough. It's in the uncanny spook valley of the spooks will satisfy no one. But it's definitely, that's the theme of the show. I guess it recaptures a little bit of season 1 in that way. I think that's my only real recommendation. I tried out a lot of new software this week, like productivity software, and it was all bad. So I'm going to just spare you. Mailbag. Matt asks, oh, by the way, before I get into the mailbag, if you didn't hear me mention it earlier, soliciting your Huberman rants, podcast@searls.co is the email. If you email me at that email, I will receive it unless it goes to spam. And if I receive it, I will read it. If I read it, I may reply. And if I'm really feeling frothy, if you fire me up, I might put it into my Things app in the mailbag and a sorted list. And then, I'm realizing that this bottleneck chokes pretty tightly here. I may read it here on the program, but I hope that doesn't stop you, because I love hearing from anybody about anything. And I would love to see an email from you, the listener. Matt asks, why has TestDouble being the software consultancy that I co-founded back in 2011 with my friend Todd Kaufman, why has TestDouble been able to avoid the classic software consulting trap of trying to stop being a software consulting company and instead turn into a product company? Well, Matt, one reason was every time this came up, I would say, let's not do that. So whenever I'm at the table, here's my line, basically. So if you're not familiar, you know, if you've never worked at a software consulting company, you look around at all these software product companies that you consult with, and you're like, wow, when they sell their product to their customer, there is zero marginal cost of goods sold. So they can just sell this software infinitely many times and make more and more money. Whereas if you're, especially if you're running an ethical agency where you compensate people a fair proportion of whatever you're billing them out at, it is a strictly linearly scaling business, right? You can charge X rate, you pay Y in salary, you keep Z margin left over. And if you want to make Z margin go up, you got to hire more people and sell to more clients. So it's just, yeah, it's way more of a slog to run a software consulting company, but it has the benefit of you don't have to come up with a brilliant product and then market the shit out of it and keep it, you know, popular enough for people to keep paying for it. So it just, even just explaining that much should say why one type of company will not be optimized to just snap their fingers and operate as excellently in the other mode, because they're just radically different. And so every time this came up, either inside Test Double or when I was talking to somebody who ran a consulting company, and they'd say, hey, we're going to do a product. We're going to do a product that helps you plan out a project and do portfolio management for your projects. Cause like as a consulting company, we do a lot of that because they do a lot of fixed bid work, and it'll schedule it all out. And then we'll just charge $19 a month or whatever, $100 a month. And you can sign up and use the same project planner that we use for our clients. And I remember being like, you know, here's the thing. If you're running a product company, even if you, every individual license that you sell to that product has no cost of goods sold, the people who will maintain and work on it are very expensive, because when you look at them on an individual basis, they contribute no revenue for their existing. It's the product that generates the revenue. Now they are just overhead. And if you look at them and you say, wow, like let's say I've got 5 consultants and I've got 5 people who work on my product, and the product is in a pretty good place. Why wouldn't I just take those 5 people working on the product and turn them around and sell them at my software consulting company as additional consultants? Because then they go from being a cost to being a revenue generating asset for the business. And so that's the trap that every single one of the software consulting companies seems to fall into. And I think, yeah, Matt used the word trap here, where now they're billing everybody. And let's say that they bill everybody out and the product starts to suffer, and the product gets worse, or there's a lot of support incidents, and then the customers are less delighted by that. But the company now, they signed up for a bigger office or a bigger lease, or they gave everyone a raise to you know, because the revenue was so good. And so now their fixed costs are higher, and they look at the whole company and they're like, well, we need to pull some people off billable work to work on the product. That is a very hard fucking decision to make, because maybe, like I said, your fixed costs go up over time, and that's all. Every dollar that person stops making for clients comes right out of your profits. So if your profits were going to be, I don't know, call it $500,000 for that year, and that person costs $200,000, by deciding that you're going to take that person off of billable consultant work and put them to work on the product, even if the product really needs that work, even if long-term it's going to result in sustained sales of the product, it's really hard to think that way when you're seeing your profits dwindle from $500,000 to $300,000. And if you've got shareholders or whatever the case, or a bonus system or whatever, yeah, let's say you give out 10% of your profits and bonuses, like Test Double did until we were in ESOP. We did a 10% profit share back to the people. Now you're telling all the people, hey, your bonus pool is going to go from 50 grand to 30 grand. So this person can go work on this product. Now there's if you do like an open book financials, it's not just the leadership decisions. Everyone's like, hey, Like this person doesn't have to go and wake up and work for client stuff all day, just gets to tootle around in product land and work their own schedule, not having to answer to anyone, right? Probably having like way less. Consulting is really challenging socially, culturally, communication wise. Like there's a lot more to juggle. It's a hard but fulfilling job. And it would be easy to look at somebody switching off of consulting work and onto product where, grass is always greener. And they get to do that. And also because of that, my bonus goes down. Like, what the fuck? Right. So like, it is very, very difficult to operate a single small to medium sized business with a general ledger that has two totally different systems for making money. One is making medium and long-term bets that have a capital expenditure in the form of building the system, and then a much smaller operational expenditure of maintaining the system. And the other one is just straight hours for dollars. And then collections. So every time this came up, to answer Matt's question, I would say, that sounds like a great product idea. Why don't we, if we were to do that, I would recommend we spin off a new company, a brand new company. Maybe we 100% own it. Maybe we, find a couple of people who want to build it and we do an equity share with them in exchange for, giving them some billable time for free, something like that. Because then that way, that new company is not hobbled by a highly optimized system that like fulfills a loop of find client, staff to client, deliver for client, get invoices paid. That loop reflects itself not just in how you sell and how you do the work. It reflects in the HR and the policies that you have, right? It reflects in your whole go-to-market, how your marketing organization is organized. Your salespeople are probably more likely to be account salespeople, right? And relationship sellers. Whereas SaaS marketing for software products has moved in a totally different direction of growth hackers and of people trying to, build marketing funnels and convert leads by showing them demos, right? That just doesn't work for consulting. So the whole organization, not just the finances, is going to be oriented in one way. And if you were trying to build a brand new product from scratch, knowing that it's like a long road to hoe, knowing it's not going to make a lot of money right away, all of those optimizations you've made on the other half of the business are going to undercut it. And as soon as the going gets tough, you're going to snuff it out. And whatever the dominant thing in the company is, that's going to win. I've seen the same thing happen in reverse, right? We've had lots of clients over the years who have a successful product that is just complex enough that it also would necessitate having professional services as an arm or a division of the company. And very often that doesn't go well. I don't have that direct experience, so I won't try to speak to it, but some of the most successful partnerships in Test Double's history has been, I'm talking to somebody who's got a fantabulously awesome product. And I tell them, what if you just use Test Double as your trusted partner for implementations and for support so that you don't need to also have a shitty consultancy happening inside of your org? And in my opinion, the smart focused tech executives would look at me and be like, that sounds fantastic, because we are a product company and not a consulting company. So I'm a big believer that companies should focus, do one thing really, really well. And if there's money to be made elsewhere, find a way to organize so that money is made more easily than trying to do two things at once. Riding a unicycle while juggling balls is harder than doing the two activities separately. So if you're a massive company, if you get to like enterprise scale, you can have different business units. You could have these things roll up to a board or an executive. Like, that's not likely to happen in a 100-person or less company. So that's my take, Matt. Thanks for writing in. Next question. Ali asks, I want to let you know I've been enjoying listening to your podcast. I don't have much time to listen to podcasts, but when I occasionally drive from Groningen to Berlin, I do enjoy your company. Hey, Ali, I used to know German. I used to know 2 years of high school German. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Thanks for being a talking head inside my head. You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. I have a question for you. How do you follow news? That's a short question. How do you follow news? Well, Ali, I try to follow it less than I used to. I was a power user of Google Reader back in the day, and I had hundreds of thousands of articles hit my Google Reader every day, to the point that one time a Google engineer contacted me to ask me how I was using it. And I would, I don't know if Google ever published this term, but I would call it jaywalking, because Vim keyboard commands worked in Google Reader. So I would just hit J from article to article to article. And I would do it during class, and I would do it, at work. I would be Google reading all day long. And I found a whole bunch of blogs and a whole bunch of news sources. And at the end of the day, it became an inbox just like any other inbox. And I would feel bad whenever I had to mark all as read, and I would just spend so much time reading news. And, in some ways, following the news that closely gave me a broader perspective, a much more technical knowledge of the things that news tends to cover, right? Like governments, policies, politics, economics. I didn't really follow any sports stuff, but I guess there's usually a sports section in the news. But ultimately, that was time that would have been way better spent on creative pursuits, or just being focused and present in whatever I was doing. So since Google Reader shut down and I stopped being a total RSS junkie, I've had to be much more intentional about how much time am I willing to give news, first of all. Second, in what context do I want to be reading news? And third, and a distant third, is how am I going to do that? Because there's lots of solutions to that problem. One, how much time do I want to give reading news? Probably 15 to 20 minutes max per day. Something to shake things up enough, give me something interesting to talk about, but not be such a big distraction that I could ever say oh wow, I've spent 10% of my day today just reading news, right? That would be a real shame, in my opinion, because there's this time is precious. So let's say 15 minutes is the answer to step one. Okay. So I think I said for step two, what kind of news, how to concentrate the information diet, right? And for that, I have a personal interest in politics as sports, right? Horse race politics, the kind of politics that are undeniably bad for society. I am fascinated by, because I want to know the answer. I actually, I follow politics like somebody, like a farmer would read the Farmer's Almanac. I want a meteorological survey to tell me who's going to win the next election so that I can know what the future is going to be. Not necessarily, but sometimes to make decisions about my future life. But definitely out of a vain and, morbid curiosity of just, how are things going to go? Who's going to win? Like a sports team. I know that I always am going to be interested in that. And so I don't necessarily feel like I need to go out of my way to search for that information, because I know that I will pick up plenty of it just passively. So what I do, I read the Apple News app for that, basically. For that stuff, when I'm, just really bored because I've got no social media on my phone, I might open the Apple News app and flick through it. Or if I've got a minute to kill in line, I might look at my watch and click through the top 5 headlines in Apple News. And that's like a vibe check. That's pretty much all I do there. The other stuff that I want to follow is also niche. It's either tech news or Apple News or video game, like subculture stuff, that I have specific outlets that publish RSS Atom feeds. And I just, after lots of years of trying to not have an RSS reader, I gave up and I went back to an RSS reader. I use NetNewsWire because it has an iCloud sync with, as well as a iPad, Mac, and iPhone apps, which is sort of the table stakes for me for following the news. And so, yeah, I just follow them. I've got, I could check, but I probably have like 14 subscriptions at any given time. I find that like loading too many subscriptions in the same kind of subculture, and you end up with just people linking to the same thing or repeating the same story 4 times. So I pick one in any category that's good enough. You know, if you want to follow Mac rumors, follow macrumors.com. You don't also need to follow 9 to 5 Mac. You don't need to also follow Cult of Mac, you know, for example, because they're all going to be in the same, swimming in the same pond. Yeah. But the most important thing for me is how much time you want to give it. And the second most important thing is, what do you want to consume and why? Like, for me, I'm much happier reducing the amount of politics that I consume, enough to be informed, but not enough to stoke outrage and worry every day. But I genuinely enjoy tech news, Apple news. I genuinely get joy out of that. I close the news and I'm like, I feel lighter, right? Not a lot of people can say that, but like that's why it requires, I think, a lot of intentionality. Same sort of thing goes for social media, right? Like I use all the social media networks all the time that leave me feeling happier than I was when I opened them, and that's why I use literally zero. Because every time I would get like I would feel worse as I was using Instagram or as I was using Twitter, and then I would close them. And then I would feel bad. I would feel worse than when I started, when I was just looking to distract myself and waste a few minutes. That's not true for everybody, but it's true for me, as pretty much unconditionally true, especially since the rise of algorithms. So that's my news diet. All right. I think this is all the news that's fit to bloviate about, so we should probably call it. I feel like this was a spicier than average. I warned you it might be peppy, but I don't feel like I really brought the pep in hindsight. I think this is pretty much, I have one speed here. I could have been funnier. You know what? We're gonna do a quick self-review, self-evaluation. This podcast, my goal was to be funnier, and I feel like I failed. I was like, I want to be lighthearted and make some goddamn jokes. So I failed myself, and I failed you by being a little bit too serious, a little too low energy, even. Yeah, I'd say it. I think I didn't connect the dots on the Atlantic stories as well as I would have liked, or as tightly as I'd like. And I'll be honest, part of that was I was distracted. I was distracted because I have a golf lesson that starts 26 minutes ago. My back is finally good enough to do golf again, I hope. And I got the text that the practice facility is closed today, so I don't have to go. And that happened right in the middle of the podcast. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I don't know what your story is, but email it. podcast@searls.co. Okay, I'm going to see you later and next time. And version 10's next, and that'll be exciting. Yay, all right. Oh, yeah, bye.